I did look at trying to do this on Zoom webinars, but it was like over £200 just for this. So just trying to make do with Google Meet this time. Cool. I've prepared a little presentation, so I'll jump onto that now. If other people join, then that's all good. So this is a presentation specific for the OCC in particular. So just to get started a little bit about me and my background. I grew up racing mountain bikes. That was my first love. I think I did my first race cross country at about the age of 9 and completely fell in love with endurance sports. I used to come home after school and read books all about sports science, and the Mountain Bikers Training Bible by Joe Friel. That was my bedtime reading when I was a teenager growing up. So quite early on gained a grasp of concepts such as periodization and how to train for a specific race and how to peak at the right time throughout the season. And that carried on throughout my teenage years until I left for university. Still race a lot. Sorry, we'll just try and see who else is ready to join. I thought you'd be able to join automatically in this, sorry. And then it was after university, I moved to the Lake District in the northwest of England, and that's when I really fell in love with trail running and discovered I had a bit of a talent for the longer distance stuff, like cross-country mountain bike races. When I was a junior, they were only 90 minutes long, so it was a completely different style of racing, like how hard can you push the pedals at lactate threshold for that period. I was training for the Bob Graham round. I managed to just about get around that a year later. And that's when I thought, this ultra running stuff is quite fun. So a couple of years after that, I started to progress in that sport. Had a couple of injuries early on, as a lot of runners do. I've learned from those mistakes. And I picked up some sponsorship with Salomon in 2016. That's when I won a couple of big races in the UK. And that continued through 2017. And here are some of my results from the UTMB weekend. I've completed UTMB, DNF'd once as well. Sadly, that was when I was in the best shape I've ever been. And I have come under top 10 at CCC. I was supposed to be doing the TDS this year, but I'm sadly going to be did not start. I've had a lingering foot injury, unfortunately. So I'm going to be crewing for one of my athletes instead, Lucas. And we're targeting a sub 20-hour time, hopefully a top 10. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's one of my favourite things to crew for someone who's really focused on a race. And I also coach, hence this presentation. I'm going to be on the lookout for new athletes sometime in the autumn, and I'm still involved in being a race director with my own events through Apex Running, 2 sky running events and 1 ultra this November around the Snowdonia Slate Trail. Aside from that, I'm the founder of Ultra Trail Snowdonia, UTS, which was acquired by UTMB in late 2021. They've recently rebranded it Eryri by UTMB, and that's the Welsh name for Snowdonia. So I worked for UTMB for 2 years, and I got to know the sort of ins and outs of how UTMB Mont Blanc works, and also the UTMB World Series itself. And it's great to see athletes like Josh Wade, who I'm pictured with here, coming up through the ranks, and seeing him finish 3rd last year at UTMB. That was a real special moment for me. UTS was one of his favourite races, so I have. I think it's quite unique in trail running to find a coach who has been an athlete and a coach and also a race director. There's only a couple that I can think of that have also competed at the highest level and also hosted, quite big international events as well. So I understand events from the runner's perspective and what they're about, and also race organisers' perspective. But looking forward, I'd like to focus a bit more on my coaching and help other people learn from what I've learned over the past, it's coming up to 15 years. So the first thing I wanted to cover was the mandatory kit. I'm just going to stop sharing this screen because I have the Sorry, it's a little bit slow. I have. I'm just going to share a different window now. I'm sure you're all familiar with the mandatory kit already on the race. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong tab. There's a couple of little tips that I've learned from over the years for this race. I'm sure if some of you are racing next week, you've already got all this pretty much dialed in. But I did want to just make a couple of bits of advice. We'll get onto the weather in a sec, but it does look like next week for your race, the weather could be a little bit mixed. So with that in mind, it makes sense to have a think about your waterproof cover. Like if you're happy, bearing in mind the OCC is a bit shorter, if you're happy to make use with a windproof, I'll come on to this in a sec, but there's some ways you can optimize your kit here a little bit. If you pack a super lightweight waterproof jacket and pants, I used to buy like extra small size stuff that wasn't planning on wearing it, you know, if the weather looked like it was going to be really good. That's one little tip. And then also for the additional list that they might have if it's going to be super cold. Looking at the weather conditions, I don't think much of this, if it stays as it is, I don't think much of this will be implemented. You know, these are quite kind conditions for the event. Really, they would likely only implement the cold weather kit if there's going to be snow, you know, and the temperatures over some of the passes higher up, particularly on UTMB, are going to be, you know, below freezing at night. So you can optimize a couple of things like the running tights in particular. Instead of carrying your actual running tights that you'd wear in winter, one little tip I used to do was buy some women's thick tights and cut the feet off them, and that'll be, you know, save a little bit of weight and also size in your pack, and that can just go in a little plastic bag somewhere. You know, so if there's some stuff on this list that you think actually I'm probably not going to actually make use of that, then there's some gains to be made. Another little tip is I always like to have a windproof without a hood, a pair of gloves and a buff, you know, like the tubular piece of fabric. I like to have those easily to hand. Like the jacket usually sits in the pocket across the back of my pack, and then the buff and the gloves can be somewhere on the front or the side, so that if it's starting to get a little bit chilly, but it's not that bad, you can put the buff on. You'd be surprised how much difference just covering your head makes to your ability to retain heat. And then if it starts to get a little bit chilly, I have a size up windproof, and that I can pull that out and put it over my pack. Just means that you can keep walking without having to take your pack off and dig out your waterproof or whatever. So I would always carry that windproof in addition to the waterproof jacket. The mandatory kit list has changed in recent years. So there's this I think it's still here. You can have, this used to be mandatory for UTMB, this additional second warm layer, and then there's two combinations. You can either have a thinner layer of long sleeve, but then you need to have a windproof as well, and that was the option that I used to go for, because the windproof is actually quite useful to keep you, as I mentioned, you can pop that on over your pack if it's upper size. What else have we got on my list here? Just a recommendation to at least get 3 runs in before the race. I'm going to send the notes from the presentation that I've got to everyone via email. But it's easy to practice going out. You go out for your training runs, your long training runs, you throw a bit of nutrition in your pack, maybe a waterproof. But you've never actually gone for a run with all the mandatory kit in your pack, and then you realize, oh gosh, that's actually quite heavy. And not just that, it changes when it's fully packed out, it changes the way the pack feels on you as well. So I put a note here to just recommend that you fill a pack with at least all this kit here, and then a few items from the additional list. Try and go out for 3 runs before back that with a bit of nutrition as well, and then just that's just going to help you on race day feel like, oh, this is actually something, this is how it should be, rather than, oh gosh, my pack's starting to rub down at the bottom of my back a little bit more now because the weight of it's pushing it into a different place, those kind of things. Another little tip is, because OCC there's no crewing points, you might find that you want to put things like gels and sachets of energy drink. We'll get onto that in a couple of slides. You might want to put those on a waist belt. If you look at a lot of top ultra runners, particularly Francois Den, he carries a lot of his bulkier, lighter stuff up on his running pack, so his waterproofs and that kind of thing. And then things like gels, the heavier, smaller things, he'll carry those on his waist pack. And yeah, you might want to practice have a think about where you want to have your poles, if it's in the quiver at the back or if it's across the back on your belt. Either way, you just need to get a few runs in with the whole system practiced, so that yeah, it's fully dialed in subconsciously. On race day, you know instinctively where things are and everything feels as it should because you've practiced it. And then just another tip to put any of your spare warm clothes, hat, buffs, etc. in a carrier bag of some sort, just to keep them dry. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen now and then move back onto the presentation that I had. Sorry, one sec. Yeah, so these are the notes I was just reading off. I'll send this out to everyone. Next thing is the weather. When I worked at UTMB, they said that they tended to keep an eye on the forecast from Meteo Blue. They thought it's tended to be the most accurate and the one that most represented the weather that they have in Chamonix. So that's what I've been using across my events since. That's pretty good. So that was the forecast that I just showed you a minute ago. These notes about heat don't look like they're going to be too much of a concern, particularly given the heat that we've had this summer. I think a lot of runners by now are quite comfortable running in temperatures of the low to mid 20s, but it is just worth bearing in mind. There are some quite high passes on OCC, and as you get a little bit higher, the air gets a bit drier. And that can just lead to dehydration a bit more quickly than it would at sea level. Perhaps this note isn't too relevant if the forecast does play out to be as it is at the moment, about keeping yourself wet. Like I always used to, if it was going to be hot, I deal quite well in the heat because I sweat a lot, so I can keep myself cool and keep moving, but I really need to do what I can to keep the fluid coming in. So I would always put my whole shirt and hat and everything under a tap before the start. It's a bit uncomfortable, like getting a damp, horrible wet top on, but that's just going to give your body a little head start in terms of evaporative cooling, and hopefully just retain a little bit more sweat as you start heating up. If you do that though, and a lot of runners will have their own little things that they do to prevent chafing and stuff, but I find cycling chamois cream in the downstairs regions just helps with preventing that if you are, getting wet for a long period of time. There is still time between now and the race if you wanted to, if you haven't done already, to follow some sort of a sauna protocol. You've still got just over a week. Any less than that, and I would advise you don't do that because it's going to hamper recovery. The shock to the shock that it gives you, I don't think it would be sensible to do that. But even if it's not going to be super hot on race day, that can have a lot of benefits. It's similar to altitude training and the effects it has. I won't get onto the science of why in this presentation. And then, as I've got my funny little hat on there, if it's going to be sunny, us Brits, we're not the best, even though we've had a lot of sun this summer. We can struggle in the heat with sunburn and stuff. I think it's good to think about keeping the neck in particular covered. You've got a lot of blood flow going through there, so I recommend a full brim hat or a Saharan cap, although they look a bit silly. They are very effective. So I wanted to touch on nutrition as well a little bit. Again, I'm sure you know most of this already, but I would be looking to aim for about 90 grams of carbs an hour. There's a lot of hype at the moment about intake levels above this, 120 grams, but it's not really been proven to be effective, and the risk of GI stress and tummy issues beyond that does rise quite a lot. When I say 90 grams, up to 30 grams of that can be from a fructose-based source if you're comfortable with that. If it's typically found in a lot of energy gels now, but it's very sweet. So if you might find actually I prefer Tailwind because it doesn't have the fructose. Then if that's the case, then I would be looking at sort of around 50 to 60 grams an hour would be plenty. If you're in this race to perform as best you can, and you're going for a fast time, I'd recommend you plan to get most of this from liquid sources for various reasons when you're running harder. So if you're at the top end of zone 2 to low end of zone 3, you're going to be breathing quite hard. It's quite difficult, and your mouth gets with that breathing, your mouth gets very dry, so it's difficult to to try and eat a flapjack or a sandwich when things are like that. So I found up to 8 hours I can manage on that, maybe with some cola and banana at the aid station, something like that. Your tummy is going to rumble a little bit. It's a little bit uncomfortable, but yeah, 8 hours is for some people a long day out. So yeah, if you're 8 to 10 hours, you could aim to be slurping your calories basically. If you're a little bit like, if your finish time is beyond that, 12, 14 hours or so beyond, I would have a different nutrition plan that's based more about it works in response to your effort level. So I always tell my athletes in the first 3 hours, like, make hay while the sun shines, while you're fresh. So that's when you can push a bit harder, stay well clear of lactate threshold. So you want to be no higher than a heart rate that represents your sort of marathon pace effort, middle of zone 3. And then after 2 to 3 hours, you really want to be settling into the top end of zone 2, heart rate wise. In that first 3 hour period, the carbohydrate demand, with the intensity being higher, is going to be very high. So that's when the nutrition plan would follow more like what this faster runner above is trying to do, setting off with 2 flasks full of energy drink, maybe a third one in the back, gels, etc., that kind of thing. And then once you get to 5 or 6 hours and it's starting to slow down a little bit, there's muscle damage occurring, it doesn't make sense to try and ram 90 grams of carbs down your throat to keep going. You're going to start burning more fat then as your pace drops. So don't stress too much about trying to force feed yourself at aid stations. That can also cause a lot of tummy issues and stuff. Generally, it's more important to focus on the hydration, and by that I mean your electrolyte and sodium intake. If that's taken care of, then you can keep absorbing carbs very well. It tends to be runners who don't take care of their hydration too well, and they lose a lot of sodium in their sweat, but they're not replacing it. The osmolality in the stomach tissue goes to pot, and it's that's when you get the sloshy water feeling in your stomach, and that's when you can be sick and stuff, because you've lost the what's it called, osmolality to absorb that water basically. Cool. I'm going to go on to a few things about route specifics for the OCC in particular. I've just checked today, and the races are now on the Live Trail app. So if you download that, go into it, create an account and log in, it should automatically find your race number. And in that, this is a new feature I've only just found this year, but you can type in what predicted finish time you think you'd like, and it will spit out a timing chart based on that finish estimate. It looks at your UTMB index to calculate these times, but that can be quite handy to have a rough idea of some times ETAs in mind, and to from that you can start to plan your nutrition a bit better. Okay, from Trian to Col de Balm, it says I'm going to, all being well, take this amount of time. So when I leave Trian, I need to leave with X amount of grams of carbs on me or whatever. That being said, don't get too carried away with split times, any ultra things, that there'll be something that goes wrong at some point. And when you start to get very hung up on ETAs and split times, and that expectation starts to misalign with the reality, you can get into a negative downward spiral mentally quite quickly. It's always good to bear in mind that things, you can get through things. Like if you're running low on energy, you can work through that, and you can generally make up that time later on. So yeah, I always say to my athletes, like it's nice to have a goal time in mind. We're human beings, we love metrics and that kind of thing, but if you can focus more on your performance, so that's your pacing, nutrition, and how you handle the race, then the time will take care of itself. I'm going to upload the interactive map now that this is also new for this year. It's pretty good actually on the website. One sec. Yeah, so if you go to the OCC page on the website, there's a really cool interactive map now. And I'll just maximize that for you. Just talk you through what I know about the race route itself. It's just taking a moment to load properly. So hopefully you've all got your buses and transport sorted to the start. Sorry, someone else is just going to join. I'm just going to let them in. On Live Trail, I think it will also tell you your sorry, one sec. It will tell you what start wave you're in now, I think. I'll just go back to that window, just let someone else in. Yes, there's four. I just had a look. There's 4 start waves. The elites go off at 8:15, and then there's 3 waves after that, 15-minute intervals. So I think if you check on the Live Trail app, I think it tells you what wave you'll be based in. It's based on your UTMB index. So if you're a faster runner, you may well be in the start first wave. So yeah, I'm just going to talk you through the route blow by blow. Down the start here, it's quite a fast, I think bits of this are on the road up the hill, there's big tracks, but once you get to here, there's a bit of a bottleneck at about 5k, so just have that in mind. It starts to go into single track in the forest all up through this climb. There's not much opportunity to overtake until you get up to near the top here. The trail starts to widen and you pick up the UTMB route here on the way to Champex-Lac. This aid station is so early on in the race, I would almost plan to just grab some cola, maybe some water, things like that, maybe a couple of bits of banana, but most runners would be making their way through that pretty quickly. Then got quite a flat road section here. It's a bit of a drag in UTMB if you're ever doing that in the future, but been sat down for a while at Champex-Lac aid station. It's tough to get the legs going on this bit. Then you turn up into the forest here, more quite runnable. You can see from the gradient down here, it's really quite fast. But this section, there is a cheeky little river crossing, which is good to know about because there's quite a distance between hopefully the first and second aid station. We're looking at like 14k more or less. Sorry, let me just move this to background. But as the trail starts to go up into the valley here, around 14 kilometers, there's a river crossing. So if you have one of your flasks with one of the plug-in water filters, or if you're just happy to drink from streams, or I mean, it can be good just to douse your head under if it's hot. That there is 2 water points here, and then quite a steep little climb up to this plateau and around here. And then this is a timing point. They have this random little it's like a farmer's barn in the middle of nowhere. You have to go up here. They did actually have, when I did OCC in 2022, they did have water here. I remember going in and there was some big tubs of water on the side, but they just don't advertise that on the race info, because I guess it's quite limited there. They don't want people relying on this. But yeah, you can have that in mind. And then quite a nice little run down to, there's a road crossing called Col de Forclaz. That's probably going to be where you'll see the most of the crowds, because it's quite easy to drive around from Chamonix here. This is all just nice, easy, non-technical, runnable single track until you hit this Col de Forclaz. There'll probably be a lot of crowds there. If you have some crew or family and friends who want to come and see us, is a good point. And then you traverse along here, and then this descent down to Trions. If it's been raining a little bit, this can be quite slippery underfoot, so just take your time down this. It does get quite muddy. That's the only really sort of muddy section of the course. And then you drop into Trion. This is a nice aid station, lots of food and drink options there. And you're just about over halfway from here. No, sorry, less than halfway. I got that wrong. 24k in. From here, there's quite a long runnable track, very wide track, nothing technical at all. All up this pass, and it's one of my favourite parts of the route. You go through the woods here, and then once you start to weave your way up here, I don't think UTMB goes up this route. It's a really nice trail. So yeah, really take your time to enjoy this, but it's a long climb as well. So you want to be eating what you can at Trion, fueling for this. So carbohydrate demand is going to be a little bit higher going up here. Sorry, struggling a little bit. Sorry. You can see that kilometre markers there, 29k in. It does start to get quite steep, and there's a little refuge here. There's a water trough there as well, so if you are really, if it's hot and you're struggling, there's a place you can get some water there. It's just a little bit of a detour off the trail. And then I think it's around here, there's a little pitch on, or maybe it's here, there's a little section where there's like a chain and like some rocks, and there's a big drop off to one side, so just have that in mind. It's not particularly technical or anything, but if you don't have the best head for heights, it's not the best. Nice rocky running around this traverse, and then you're starting to make your way to Col de Barm. This section is just beautiful. It's part of the Haute route, the Chamonix to Zermatt route. Some really nice views back to the glacier behind you. Lovely traverse along here. Some interesting little rocky bits to watch out for, but then a nice traverse here, and then you're hitting 32k, more or less halfway, and then you're into this aid station at Col de Barm. Here it's worth taking a little bit of time just to maybe have a sit down, just mentally reset, because the next leg is very long and it's without any water. You can see on the profile here. I was mountain biking up here a couple of weeks ago, and from what I can see of this route, I don't think there's anywhere else that you can kind of get water. Like, I've pointed out a couple of those refuges there, so this is quite a long section, net downhill. It's mostly downhill, so hopefully it'll be a bit quicker for you. But if you are one of the slower runners, that's it's worth bearing in mind. You might need to carry a couple of flasks extra in the back of your pack. And then we start to pick up the old UTMB route a little bit around this area. And yeah, this is how I recognise it. Down through the switchbacks here, back into the wooded forest. This bit, not this traverse here, but a bit further on, the trails around this area are quite technical and rooty underfoot. It's easy to trip up and stub your toe and stuff, so yeah, just have that in mind. Hopefully it won't be too bad for you. And then we have this climb This is at the TC Valley, and I'm assuming TC is just timing control, so they might have some emergency kind of water there, but again, they haven't advertised it on this telecabin. Sorry, yeah, they haven't advertised it. So if you are desperate, I'm sure they'll have something. But from there, you go up this path here. I'm just trying to think. Right, okay, I've spotted another. This sheet here. This does have a water trough, but it'll mean coming off the race route a little bit and dropping down. So if you're getting really desperate, that's an option. They have might even be able to see it once the rendering catches up. These are umbrellas here, and then there's a water trough just around the north side. Sorry, is it north? Yeah, north side of the building here. So it's worth knowing about. And then this is a lovely trail. You've got a view directly ahead of Mont Blanc. I was mountain biking down this just the other day last week when I was in Chamonix. Sorry, this works backwards to the way my mouse is trying to point, so it's a little bit counterintuitive. And then you're up onto the Aguida Possets, it's called. And this is a really spectacular trail. If you're into mountain biking or if you like technical running, this is one of the best in the valley. It is a little bit rocky in places and it's quite steep. So here it's just worth bearing in mind that you're about to do an awful lot of running back to the finish from Argentière. So I would still recommend you try and ease your way down this climb. You don't want to get to Le Tour and realize, oh gosh, I've just attacked that a little bit too hard and I've completely blown my quads out. Now I can't run properly. Sorry, this is just catching up a little bit. I'm going to try zooming out a bit. But now I'm completely lost. Let me just start this again. So this is the steep descent down to Le Tour, across the river there. Nice little spot. Another good place if you are struggling in the heat for whatever reason. You cross over a nice river there. It's a good opportunity to give your hat a dunk in some ice cold glacial water, and then you traverse this nice forest trail. Really nice trail this, before you drop down to Montroc, which is where I lived in 2017. That's my favourite part of Chamonix. And then it's just over there. And then you drop into Argentière. This is a really nice place. The aid station is like in the plaza, in the village centre. There'll be lots of crowds and stuff. Let me just double check. Yeah, you go. There's just a funny little out and back bit here. I'm just wondering what that's about, but I think this area. Oh yeah, around the car park here. That's a bit odd. I just wondered if the aid station is somewhere else or if there's a problem with the GPX file. I'm not 100% sure where in Argentière that aid station is. Oh yeah, I get it. It is still in this plaza. It's this triangle here. So it's changed a little bit. There's an out and back there now. And then you go back onto the race route this way. Back onto the Petit Balcon Nord trail. So it's a nice flow level trail throughout the Chamonix Valley. But I put in my notes that you want to be getting into Le Tour feeling like you have something left in the legs. I know that's easier said than done in any 50k, but there's a lot of downhill running. You can see on the profile here. You don't want to burn through all your matches and then be hobbling along all this section. There's big time that can be made up if you've paced it well over someone that hasn't, and you're able to keep moving well throughout all this. Net descent. There's a couple of undulations. I mountain biked this trail last week when I was in Chamonix. It's pretty. Maybe it's not going to be fun when you've got 50k in the legs, but it is quite a nice trail. And then it drops you down eventually into the back of Chamonix. The old route used to go up onto the Aiguille Rouge, finish on the opposite side of the valley, but they've had a lot of issues there with nature sensitivity and ecological issues. So over on this side of the valley now, and then you're almost within touching distance of Chamonix. This, once you come out of these trees, you hit like a wide dirt track. It's after this traverse here. This is still the Petit Balcon Nord Trail. You go down through the woods here, and it's around about here that things do start to get a little bit boring. It's just a wide 4x4 track for quite a long way. So it's not quite the finish that UTMB has or used to have when it's you're coming down these lovely switchbacks in the woods. It's a bit different now. The MCC race route also goes along this way, down through the valley bottom, and then down through these woods back to Chamonix. Not a great deal to report here. It's pretty obvious. It's just fast, flat, quite boring running. If you prefer running to power hiking, which is not what I am, then you'll enjoy this section along the river. And once you get to here, this is where all the expo is for the event. So the crowds will start cheering you on once you cross this bridge here. There'll be people watching here, down to here. Hang a right over the bridge. Just watch out for the traffic here. It's probably going to be manned, but this is where the big expo is. The bib collection is at the sports centre, which is back up on this road as well. So in these triangles. And hang a right, hang a left onto the main streets of Chamonix. It looks like you used to go down here, take a left and do like a detour around here, and then come back up. And that was quite nice because people would be, eating their dinner and stuff, and loads of people to cheer you on around there. But maybe it will be that way come race day. I'm not too sure, but the GPX seems to indicate that you just go here, take a right, and then straight to the finish. So that's that route in a nutshell. If anyone's got any questions, just feel free to ping them up in the chat. I'm just going to stop sharing this for now. If anyone's got anything, hopefully that's more or less covered that race route, but if anyone wants to know anything in particular, just feel free to ask. I'm a little bit ahead of schedule here. I don't think this is going to be 75 minutes. It might be for the full UTMB route on Thursday. I'm just going to turn the light on because it's a bit dark, sorry. Yeah, so I'm just going to jump back to my presentation. So I've got a few final notes. Yeah, people in various forums or in the UK, they're always asking about shoe choices for various events. For this race, it's pretty straightforward. There's only that section that I mentioned down to Trion where there's perhaps a little bit of loose mud and stuff that would warrant having a deeper lug in the tread, but the rest of the trails are pretty the surface is okay, so you can kind of wear whatever you want. I don't think there's a question come through here by Rob. I'll get back to that in a sec. I don't think there's too much need for like a maximal cushioning type shoe for this event, unless that's what you're really comfortable with, because it's what you've trained in. You can see in the photo here, I used the Hoka Zinal, the first version. Those were a little bit too low. I did start to feel it in my feet after. If I was going to do this race again, I'd probably go for something like the Hoka Tecton X. So that's got a little bit more stack height. And it's got two different types of foam, something like that, or VJ are a brand I'm really fond of. They fit me really well. The VJ Max 2, possibly the Ultra that they do. That's getting into sort of big Ultra specific territory though, in terms of the stack height. And this kind of race isn't the kind of one that's really gonna. It's not like doing a 100-miler, which your legs are going to be completely trashed. You still want to have a decent bit of ground feel. Someone else is just wanting to join a little bit late, better late than never. So there was a question there. Let me just try and go to this question. Any thoughts on pre-race morning in Oziers? I don't know quite how to pronounce that. Hopefully that was close. There's quite a long time as in wave 3. Can you stay warm? When I did OCC, I was in the first. I think I was in the first wave, if not the second. There are a couple of cafes around there. When I did MCC, people were kind of crammed into the cafe there, just trying to stay warm. That was a bad weather year. It was really cold. There was snow, but there's plenty of places around there that you can go into, to get out of the cold. In terms of staying warm, like hopefully, if you brought all your mandatory kit, that should be enough to keep you warm. Looking back at the temperatures, though, it doesn't look like it's going to be really that cold, but you never know. In the Alps, the forecast can change quite dramatically day by day. Cool. Yeah, in terms of last minute, socks as well. I've always been a big fan of Drymax. You'll see them in all the photos of me throughout this presentation. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. These are the Drymax Maximum Protection socks. They've got Teflon woven into the fabric. So if you put them on and walk around like a laminated floor, it's like sliding everywhere. But the technology does work. They're quite a thick sock though, so they're worth buying and trying beforehand. If you're in the UK, Centurion Running stock them, and then I think the Ultra Running store stock them as well. Just a couple of little last minute tips as well. It's easy to go to the expo and buy a bit of this and buy a bit of that and think, oh, this is cool, I'll use a bit of that, but try to avoid that. It's much better to stick to what you know. There's plenty of time for events in the future to try those new things. A light massage, if you have been training quite hard recently, if you're going to have that, at least 2 days out. It can cause a little bit of dehydration and stuff, and if the massage if it's a bit deep, you can actually be a bit sore the next day, so try not to have that too close to the event. I know a very good physiotherapist who's based in Chamonix. I can forward you on his details if you would like to have that before or after. If you're having one after, try and leave it 48 hours just to let the inflammation die down. Otherwise it's going to cause more damage than good. Try to do some sort of running the day before. I usually recommend a 40-minute session just with a few easy hill sprints. The purpose of this is just to put a bit of snappiness back into the legs, build a bit of good muscle tension. If all you do is lie on the sofa throughout that day, you'll not feel too good in the legs the next day generally. Try to take a full rest day 2 days before, so that's on the Tuesday. But try to avoid doing too much in the way of stretching and yoga. That's just going to not be the best thing for what you want in your legs, tension-wise. Another note, I'm going to be in Chamonix from Monday. I'm crewing for Lucas, my athlete, in the TDS, and I'll be staying there for 2 weeks, which will be good. Nice little holiday. So yeah, if you want to discuss coaching in future or any other goals that you have, I'll be there. feel free to get in touch. There was a question from Cassia who asked, is there a minimum required fitness to complete? It's a difficult question to answer that. At first I was thinking, well, if you can do like a sub-4 marathon, that's great, but it really depends on the individual. That might be a massive goal. That might take a full year to work towards before. It's easy for me to say, oh yeah, anyone could do it, because I progressed through the ranks in ultra running quite quickly, but it's 50, well, it's nearly 60k this race, and with a lot of climbing. But I think this is more of an achievable goal than finishing like a flat 50 miler, to be honest, in some ways. Just with the breakup in the different muscle groups that you're using, I almost find if you can get to a place where you're comfortable hiking uphill well, using the poles and your technique with them is dialed in, this is a very achievable goal. So I've put here a note just to sort of use as your first sort of data point before you, from that you can sort of extrapolate whether or not you think this is going to be achievable to finish within the cut-off time. I've put any sort of trail marathon, if you can look at finishing that roughly in the top 2/3, that's a great first aim. If you're starting from absolute zero, you know, so that might take 2 years to work up to that. But there's a lot of books and a lot of knowledge that you can take on board to help you get to that point. And then once you're stepping up to the 50k ultra, so working with a specific coach that works in this, or just trying to take more of a deep dive into AI or some other books that are specific to ultra running, that's going to help you get to the 50k. But yeah, definitely achievable. The one that takes, I mean, it's obvious really, the 100-mile distance, that's one where you need to have done your homework, and we're talking like several years build up to something like that. So yeah, what else did I have in this? No, I think that's all I've wanted to cover. I'll send the presentation out via email as well, and I've recorded this, so I can drop that I can put it on YouTube and send a link to that and share that as well later. But yeah, I made some time at the end for a Q&A session, so if anyone has any burning questions about qualification for UTMB or anything to do with ultra running in general, kit, whatever, maybe you're racing OCC next week, maybe it's on your radar for the future, but please feel free to drop it in the chat now, and I'll hang on for a few minutes. Yeah, it's a really nice route, the OCC. I kind of worked backwards through the races over the years. I started with the UTMB and then did TDS and then CC, blah, blah, and then yeah, OCC. And it was one of my favourites actually. It was a very hot day the year I did it. So I did have some stomach issues at the top of Flagere, which the race route doesn't go down now. But yeah, it was a nice day out. If you're getting the coach to the start, it does mean quite an early start, and you know, it makes for quite a long day. You have quite an advantage if you can get a lift round with someone else in the morning. I'm just trying to think what else is specific to this race in particular. There's finished drop bag. It's in the sports centre. So if you get to the finish and your accommodation is a little bit further out of town, whatever, there's drop bag facility. You can get a shower in the sports centre as well. It's worth making use of as well. What else specific to this one? There's a finisher's meal it's not that well advertised, but the finisher's meal is at the opposite end of the plaza where the finish is. It's worth bearing in mind. It's just a great atmosphere in that finish area throughout the race, particularly later on in the week. If you're hanging around, you know, you'd see all the athletes come in for CCC, and then UTMB sets off on the Friday, like just before the first winner in the CCC's due to arrive. So that's a great day to be around there. And it's quite nice with this being a bit earlier in the week. You can get your race done and then relax and enjoy the rest of the weekend. bit difficult to get into this race now compared to when I did it. You have to go through the running stones process unless you're an elite athlete and can qualify directly. The last time I looked, on average, there was about 7 running stones required to get an entry to one of the races. So yeah, that might take at least a year of doing several of the UTMB World Series races before you can build up to that. It might be a pipe dream for some people. I think if your long-term goal is to do UTMB Mont Blanc, the full 100-miler one day, I think it makes sense to focus on trying to get into that first, rather than, well, I'll do OCC and then build up, because once you've done OCC, you're starting from scratch with your running stones again. I think if that was the goal, then you could maybe look at trying to do CCC, but I would personally advise you try to keep your running stones and do a different mountainous 100k race. Maybe it's a UTMB World Series event like the Eider or one of the others in the Alps, the new Monte Rosa one, something like that. That's going to give you a good idea of whether or not you can finish UTMB before you go into the ballot. You don't want to go into it too early and then DNF. You really need to have been around the event, around the race route as well, over maybe like a 3 to 4 day fast packing trip, going in the sheets. I've done that several times over the years. You can also do the OCC race route that way, if it's on your radar for the future. So we're probably going to end a little bit early here, just due to the short race that I gave you the walkthrough on, but hopefully that's all been helpful to those who are either racing next week or want to at some point in the future. Like I said, I'll be there throughout the week, so if you wanted to reach out and add anything specific that you want to pick my brains on, more than welcome to share that with you. But yeah, otherwise I think we'll call it a night there. Thanks very much for joining. It's been quite fun to do, and a little bit of a good warm up for tomorrow, and then the longer one, UTMB on Thursday. I think some of you are going to join me in those as well. So yeah, thanks again, and I'll call it a night there. Hope you have a good evening, whatever you're up to. Good night. Cheers.